This episode contains descriptions of domestic violence. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, call 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. You can also find resources at thehotline.org.
My ex, even in his letter, said, what if I'd just gone to play Frisbee golf? Like, how different would my life be?
Elaine Winn is a teacher in Portland, Oregon, and met Brian online in 2008.
We were together, I want to say, over 2 years before we got married.
Brian had a 5-year-old daughter from a previous relationship that Elaine loved. And it wasn't too long into their marriage that Elaine found out their family would grow.
We were actually sitting out front of our house, and we'd just given my dishwasher to one of my very good friends, Jennifer, and her wife at the time. And I was sitting out on the porch, and I remember being like, God, I'm just really sore. And, I described pregnancy symptoms, and they were like, you're pregnant. You're totally pregnant. I was like, what? No, I'm not. And so they were so excited that we went out and got a test right then, and I took it. And so I got to be there and be like, yep, I was pregnant with 2 of my friends.
Not long into her pregnancy, Brian started to act strangely.
At the time, I didn't know. He was going through a custody battle for his daughter. And so I think part of it was stress. And then I think part of it was he had given up smoking, and because I was pregnant. And then I think that he was in like a hypermanic phase. I'm not sure of the exact terms for that you would say for bipolar.
Mm-hmm. Was he diagnosed as bipolar before this?
I don't remember. I remember him talking about having anxiety, when we were married, and he did take anxiety medication. But I don't remember if he said he was bipolar or diagnosed as that, but he didn't let on nearly as much. And so he hadn't been sleeping for a couple months. And I didn't know he wasn't sleeping a lot because I would go to bed, and then when I would wake up, he would be in bed, and then I would go to work. And then I found out from friends later that he was sleeping during the day, saying that he was like in this like hyper focus, but he was trying his best to not be in it and to not take his anxiety medication, feeling like he could control his anxiety himself and wanting to just be like, well, I don't need as many meds. And then all that kind of compounded.
Brian had also recently left his job. What did he do for work?
He worked for a local framing shop in the back end of the business. In those last few months, that company got sold, and then it had new owners, and he did not get along with the new owner, which, hindsight, I could see, it's another flag that something was up as well, because he'd never had problems like that at work before.
Yeah, but lots of people don't like their new bosses, so it's easy also to just explain it away.
But I think sometimes other people could see their thinking is not always on track, whereas I couldn't see it because I'd been in that as it progressed. So I was missing some of those signs because you get used to it.
So July 16th, 2011 started just as any normal day.
I had not slept well the night before. And so I had been resting and kind of taking it easy. I was just on ginger ale and crackers for quite a few weeks at that point. Don't drink ginger ale to this day. My friends had come over to go disc golfing with our roommate in the basement. And they really were trying to get me to come. And I was like, I'm just not feeling good. I don't want to go out. And so my husband was like, I'm going to go. And I was like, oh, have fun. He's like, no, I'll stay. I'll stay here and take care of Elaine. She's not feeling very good. And so we all said goodbye to those friends. And my husband and I stayed home to watch a movie.
If only he had gone. This is Live to Tell, the podcast where I talk to some of the bravest people who have been through the most horrifying things and lived to tell the tale. I'm Caitlin Van Mall. Elaine wanted to watch the movie in bed to be more comfortable.
So I went upstairs and we got the laptop out and we got it all loaded and ready to go. And my ex was like, oh, let me run downstairs and get something and I'll be right back. So we walked into the room, and from what I can remember, he stood in the doorway and looked at me with a really weird look. And I was like, what? But I know he got up on the bed and said something about something out the window. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, what? Like, I don't see anything out the window. And then he walked across the bed and walked right off the bed. And I was like, you know how people say, like, what are you on? Like, they use that expression. I said that to him. And then I realized, okay, he's literally on something right now.
Elaine would find out later that Brian had gone downstairs to take ketamine.
And then he went over to the window and started talking about, like, a devil out the window. And I said, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm not staying in here with you like that. I'm leaving. And so I turned around to get, because I was just wearing a shirt and I'd taken off my pants at that time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm going to put those on and I'm going downstairs. I'm leaving.
She didn't know what was going on and didn't feel safe staying there.
And then he turned and he looked at me and he had the craziest look on his face, which is one you can't forget, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That he had the crazy look. And I was like, he's looking at me, but he's not looking at me like it's me. And then I didn't even get to get my pants on all the way because I could tell he was going to do something else. So I was like, I'm not taking my eyes off of him to see.
The next thing Elaine knew, Brian came over to her and began to choke her.
I remember watching an Oprah episode and the man on the show had talked about how women's strongest part of their body is their legs. Mm-hmm. And so if you are in a back position or can get yourself to where you can kick, you can really defend yourself. And so I was like, well, I am going to kick. Here we go. Thanks, Oprah. That's what I remember thinking at the time. So I'm pretty sure that's how I got out of like the stranglehold, and other stuff was using my leg power. I was really into running and lifting weights for quite a few years at that point. So I was pretty strong. Mm-hmm. So he got off of me and rotated his body towards his nightstand. And I saw him look at his pocket knife and look at me.
The knife was about 4 inches long.
He's going to grab that. And then he's yelling at me, calling me the devil. Like, you're the devil and something else. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I have to get to the knife before him. So we both lunged for the knife and fought over that. And I couldn't keep up with his arm strength or his hand strength. So he got the knife first. And then I remember thinking I have to get out of the room. So our upstairs was really small. You came to the top of the staircase, our bedroom on the right, teeny tiny bathroom in front of us, my stepdaughter's bedroom on the left. Mm-hmm. That's it. When I got out of the room and I'm at the top of the stairs, I just had this feeling like he was totally just going to take me out down the stairs. So I ran into the bathroom and I tried to shut the door on him, but I couldn't shut it all the way because I knew there was a lock. And so we battled over the door and trying to shut it for a while, which he eventually forced the door open. And we fought over the knife. And so that's how I have all the lacerations on my hands and my fingers. And that the slashing at me when he had the knife, that cut the upper tendon in my left arm all the way across and then down a little bit. So during this, your adrenaline is flowing, but at the same time, your hands are also kind of not working. So really, but I knew he was going to stab me more. And so I had to get we had a pedestal, sink, and toilet. That's all there was. So I thought, okay, well, at least if I can get behind the pedestal sink, then that's part of my body he can't get to while we're fighting. And almost all my stab wounds are on the left side. So it kind of went to where like he would get me and then I would get my hand on the blade and I would hold it because I thought he can't stab me if I'm holding the knife. And so he got really frustrated over that. And there was times where because we're now in this smushed in this itty bitty teeny tiny bathroom, where he was like screaming complete gobbledygook in my ear. So he's right here and I'm holding the knife and he's screaming at me. And then it would go back to the devil and whatever else. And then at one point he put his face right up in my face at that time and I bit his nose. I thought, you're going to get that close to me, I'm going to bite you because I have to let you know I'm not going out easily. So even in his picture, you can see that cut across his nose. That's where I bit him. And I would just be like holding the knife. So he'd get frustrated that he couldn't attack me, so that he strangled me 2 more times in the bathroom. And I do remember my vision going from normal vision and seeing it shrink and going to the little pinhole. And I've even slumped forward to where I remember my head being like against the wall. And I remember thinking about like my parents and how I have this baby in me. And I was like, I'm totally going to die right here in this bathroom. And this is not how I want it to end. I can't even tell you anymore exactly what I did to get out of the stranglehold, but I did get out of it. And so ever since then, I've always thought that like, boy, the power of your thinking in any scary circumstance or intense circumstance can play a big role in how you survive and make it out of that circumstance. Because if I'd just been like, well, that's it, this is awful, focused on something else at that time, maybe I wouldn't have survived.
Yeah. You're literally fighting for your life at the time where it seems most hopeless. You still have to choose to keep fighting.
Yeah.
What do you remember solidly next?
What I remember next is that I realized my hands were really, really bloody. I don't think I realized they were as cut up as they were. So we were in the bathroom still. At some point, he stabbed me in the stomach and I said to him, you're going to kill our baby. Like, you're going to kill the baby. Is this what, is this what you want? Because this is what you're saying. Because I was like, I'm yelling at him. I'm screaming. I'm doing everything really loud and I'm not getting through.
Yeah.
So I thought, this is not the approach that's working. What if I switch an approach? And I start saying it like, you're going to kill the baby. Like maybe he'll hear a different tone.
Yeah. So maybe if you de-escalate, he'll de-escalate.
Maybe. And he actually has said that that's one of the things that he heard. And then one of the reasons why he slowed down. So that gave me time also to do more holding on to the knife. And then at some point, like he ended up more in the psychosis right in those few seconds and stabbed me in the leg. I have a really big one on my leg and I pulled the knife out and I held it. And I remember being like, I'm going to hold this now, like with my death grip, because I'm not giving it back to you. Like, that's it. That's all the stabbings I'm going through. At some point, he stepped back out of the bathroom and looked at me with such surprise. And I shoved him back. And I was like, I got to get down the stairs. But I remember the stairs being pretty challenging because at this point I've lost a lot of blood. And I remember thinking like, I'm not fully clothed. Well, I guess that's out the window, neighbors. Here I am coming out without my clothes on. It's so funny how you can think of regular things like that in the middle of a scenario. And I got to the front door and it had a deadbolt. And whenever you shut it, it like locked the deadbolt. And I remember I got to the deadbolt and I was like, oh my God. I looked at my hands and I was like, how am I going to open it? And I stood there and I remember being like, I can't even get my hands to work. Like my left arm was lacerated to the point where the left hand just didn't even function now. It just on limp. And then my right hand, I remember looking at it and I could just see how like cut up it was. Like there's literally pieces of skin hanging and like the whole thing. But I was like, I have to. There's no other way for me to get out.
She finally got the door unlocked and got outside.
And I had to go down like several stairs. And at this point, I remember being like, whoa, I'm getting woozy.
Yeah.
Ooh, it is getting hard to walk. And I began yelling because I was like, I got to get somebody outside. I don't know how much farther I'm going to make it. And so I was yelling for the neighbors. And I think it was like, my husband's trying to kill me and he's inside. Please help me. I got out to the sidewalk and turned left. And there's a little alley there and it's all gravel. And I was like, I gotta walk through this gravel in my bare feet. And I was like, I remember thinking that like that's what's gonna hurt the most while I'm in this situation is walking through the gravel in my bare feet. So I looked up and a neighbor had just come out his front door and was coming down the steps. And I'll never forget the look on his face when he turned and looked at me and lost like all color in his face. And he just froze. And he turned around and yelled back into the house, like, call 911. And then he told his daughter something else about like staying inside or something like that. And I remember him just like running. And then that was it. I fell over. Couldn't stand up anymore. So I remember laying on the ground and I'm laying in the middle of the driveway. And I made a joke about, of course, the one time you fall outside, you're wearing your grandma panties. And then them laughing and looking at me like there's the craziest look on their face. And I was like, you got to find humor somewhere in this. I got to survive it. Like, now you know my personality. It's like, I'm going to find something funny in just about anything that happens. And that was really funny to me at the time. And it kept me, I think, from hyper-focusing on some of the other things going around me. Instead, I can remember looking up and seeing the sky and the trees around me. And then I could hear other neighbors.
Neighbors started pouring out of their houses to see what the commotion was.
I remember the neighbor across the street from us screaming, "Who is that? Is that Elaine?" And I said, "Yes, it's me." And she said, "Where is your ex?" And I said, "He's in the house." And she said, "Oh my gosh, it was him." And then I could hear people saying, "Please get towels." And then I could feel them put the pillow under my head at that point. I could hear neighbors directing each other. And then all of a sudden, a nurse appeared next to me. And she's like, "Nope, you got pressure on the wrong points. You need pressure here on your leg and put pressure here on her neck on this wound. And you're going to lean down here." And she just started directing people, telling them where to go. It turns out that nurse drove by every day at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And that happened to be the time I went outside and collapsed in the driveway. So she pulled over and stopped and helped to save me, because I think without some of her instructions, I probably very well could have died.
The paramedics were nearby, but weren't allowed on the scene until Brian was secured.
But they couldn't give the all clear because at this point, my ex-husband had come out on the porch and was yelling, "Please take care of my wife. I love her. Please help her," yelling things like that. And the police are there saying, "Are you armed, sir?" And they could see he had a knife that he had used to try to cut his own wrists. And that the aim and accuracy wasn't so true. He had like a big slash on his arm. And I found out later that he went downstairs to get out a gun that was in the basement, but couldn't figure out how to load it, which I didn't think we even had bullets. It's news to me. But couldn't. And so once police knew that he had other weapons, and they had to clear like the whole house, like all floors in the backyard. So I could hear the cops yelling up onto the porch at my husband. I could hear them talking to the paramedics over their walkies around the corner saying, "You can't come yet. Nope, I'm sorry,
After clearing the house of any danger, the paramedics were finally allowed to get to Elaine.
I do remember being in the back and being just like so thankful that I had gotten into the ambulance. I also remember the paramedic leaning over me and he's sweating profusely. and it's just dripping in my face. And I remember like, wow, he's doing a lot of stuff. He is really working hard, not connecting at the time. It's because I'm dying. And I look over at the monitor, at the heart monitor and everything. And I see that heartbeat is not very strong. I think that at that point, it got even a little more intense because he started yelling at me for me to stay with him. You have to stay with me. You have to stay with me. Do not close your eyes. He said, I'm going to give you a shot in your knee of this new kind of medicine or whatever it was. He's like, I don't know if it hurts. I would tell you if it did, but this is new and I've never given it to anybody before. And I remember I like silent screamed. It hurt so bad. And so it's something that is supposed to help you stay alive. I don't know what it is. And he was like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I have to give that to you.
Yeah.
We're almost there. And when we got to OHSU, he was like, we're here. You're going to make it.
They got her into the ER and it was full steam ahead.
I had a new young girl who was her first night as head of the ER. Finally, when it settled down, she said, I have to tell you, this was my first night ever. And boy, you tested me and put me to the test on this.
Yeah, maybe we didn't need to share that, though.
And she was like, well, I'm really proud of you, like how hard you fought to stay here. After they took care of my first and most primary injuries, they sent me into another part of the emergency room. I just remember it was a small, dark room, and they had to sew up my hands. It took over 4 hours, and they used mouth-numbing Novocaine because my hands were so frail and had been ripped up so much. They're like, we can't give you anything else because it has to be localized, like in your hands, and because you're pregnant. So until we know more of what you can have, they're like, this is going to really, really hurt. So the head of the ER and another young guy sat there and sewed up my hands for 4 hours. And I remember just laying on my back with both my hands out. And they literally just used like stitching thread that you use, for stitches, and sewed up my hands like that.
Elaine's parents got there while they were still sewing up her hands.
My mom sat down and the first thing she said was, so are you going to stay married to him? And that was like the first thing out of her mouth. Because she was
I'm doing great, Mom. Thanks for asking.
And that's just the first question I remember her saying in that room. She could have already done all that part earlier. And I said, no, I'm getting a divorce. And her whole body just went like, oh, okay. And then you could see that she could be my normal loving mom, but she was so worried that I was going to go all through this and go back to him. And so she was just like, okay, now I can relax enough to fully be here and be present and help you in all the ways that I should.
There was some confusion over what pain medications Elaine could take that wouldn't harm her pregnancy.
I just felt like they were going super cautious, and that somehow like giving me the next dose of whatever I was allowed to be on just didn't happen, or they waited too long. Like it's every 3 hours. And this was like at 3 hours and 20 minutes. And my body was just totally shutting down in some ways. And I'll just never forget, my dad has his mail or whatever he brought with him to read. And he's fanning me with what he brought to read because I'm hot, but then my teeth are chattering. And my dad's getting really mad because he's like, you should not have this kind of pain levels. And having this sheet on, but the sheet hurt so bad when it touched my legs. I couldn't even explain how bad it hurt. It just hurt really bad. And I couldn't let anything touch me. My brother's at the end of the bed, kind of like, because I don't have any clothes on, right? I can't have a sheet on. So my brother's like, this is kind of awkward, but I'm trying to help at the same time. And I will never forgotten how good my brother was about not letting on that, it was more than what he wanted to see of his 33-year-old sister at the time. And how they were also supportive about that. And the nurse who's in charge of my floor comes in and she's like, looks through the chart and she's like, when was the last time you had any pain medication of any kind? She was like, your pain level right now is so high that your teeth are chattering. She's like, it's been way too many hours since you got any kind of pain medication of any kind. She's like, I'm calling right now. I'm finding out what you can have while pregnant.
Elaine knew Brian had been arrested at the house, but still needed to give a statement to the police. Were police keeping you informed about what was going on while you were in the hospital?
Yes, they interviewed me almost immediately. They're pretty sure they interviewed me in the emergency room. It took like first statements, because I saw those typed out, and I know that they were in the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately met the two detectives who took on the case, and they came to visit me like basically all 8 days that I was there. They ask you your story more than once, obviously, to look and see if there's any changes.
Was that frustrating to be like, we've been through this?
I don't think so. To me, it didn't bother me at all because I just saw them as doing their jobs. I'm a teacher, so I always feel like the community helper roles. We don't really like it when people try to tell us how to do our job. And so I was just like, I'm just going to trust them and the process. So we got charged with attempted murder constituting domestic violence. And I don't have any control
Right.
over any of that. So there were quite a few months of him battling what was happening with the court system and saying, I didn't get those papers and I didn't get these papers and I don't have a lawyer and now I'm representing myself. And yes, that always turns out really well, doesn't it? And that, like, I gave a restraining order and him saying, no, I don't accept the restraining order. My divorce, he fought that for at least a year. There was a lot of court at that time. There was a lot of testifying and I was doing restraining orders at the same time.
Navigating the process of filing a restraining order was difficult, especially when she didn't have the use of her hands to even fill out the forms herself.
What was a big thing for me at the time was how hard the system is to maneuver as a woman. What if you didn't speak English, right? And now you've been attacked and everybody is asking you all these questions until they get somebody who can interpret there. Afterwards, you get an advocate. And I saw women getting their restraining orders who had been completely beaten up in the face. And I saw them so scared, like their whole body was shaking. And you could tell like this was fresh. They're in a hotel. They all have to stand up there and say all this and prove how scared they were. And I was like, I think this coming to do these restraining orders is harder than almost anything I've done, because every time I was called last, I don't know if they're doing it by last name or what, and I had to listen to the whole room of women and men share why they needed to have a restraining order. And then hear the judge say why they were or were not granted. And I just kept thinking, what if I was in a state where I didn't have my parents? What if I didn't have this place to live? I would be in the hotel. All those little things that you don't realize how many community members have to come together. So I wish that the system was set up so that people could maneuver within it in an easier way.
One of Elaine's many times in court was testifying to a grand jury.
And I just remember thinking to myself, because in high school I did some theater and I was on speech team and I did stuff where I was up in front of people. Still makes me crazy nervous, but I taught myself how to be like, okay, you just have to do this thing. I remember just starting at the very beginning and telling the whole story. And then the grand jury could ask me questions. And you could see that they were pretty visibly shook by my story. And that one lady was crying when I was talking. And then another man was like, I just keep thinking about this being my wife or my sister. And so I finished the testimony and I went out, and the DA said, that is the best grand jury testimony I have ever heard in all of my career. She said, you were so detailed and like you were sure about it and you just answered my question. She said, I'm serious.
Brian wasn't present for Elaine's grand jury testimony, but he did listen to it later.
The night before it was supposed to go to regular trial, he listened to it and decided to take the plea deal.
But he didn't even plead guilty. He pled no contest.
Yes, to a deal to get 7.5 years.
Did that make you frustrated?
What made me frustrated more was, in my case, yes, he used an illicit drug and did it. But what if there's another woman whose husband just does it and it has nothing to do with the drugs and hurts her that badly? Would he also be offered 7.5 years? It's 90 months in jail talk. So that's the low as they can go. Like, that's the minimum. Like, he could have gotten more if it went to trial.
Did you want it to go to trial?
I didn't necessarily, there were times where I was like, let's go, bring it. Like, he made my life so difficult for all of those months. You could have just said, yep, I did it. I don't want to make Elaine do all of these things. I'm going to just accept the restraining order. But it wasn't. It was fighting the divorce. There were times where I was like, I would much rather have you be in there for longer, because it'll be even longer till I have to worry about you being out.
Though Brian was going to prison, Elaine still needed the restraining order in place.
There was not an agreement to not contact me. So I was asking for no contact. And he's not supposed to contact me, but contacting me through his family or through friends of ours is still contacting me.
Mm-hmm.
Having them message me in an email, where is his phone charger? I don't have use of my hands. I don't really want to get onto the email and answer where your phone charger is.
Why does he need a phone charger?
I have letters here that, like, that's what they say. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But, and then it goes into like pages and pages of how he's the victim. And I'd be like, well, I don't really.
Oh, did you make him do the ketamine?
Right. No, I didn't make him do anything.
Huh.
You know, it's not my fault you don't have friends now. I don't have any say in whether you got beat up in jail. I don't have any say in your injuries that you got from jail. I did not ask anybody to do any of that. I have no part in any of that. I am not in charge of jail code or anything else.
Brian's family was not helping matters.
The other side of the family really wanted to have contact with my son. And I was like, that's fine, but I am not getting a whole loving vibe. I'm being told how things are going to happen in my house that I lived in. We're going to have a garage sale and sell all of your stuff. No, I'm not okay with that. We get to go and take the stuff out that's mine. And then whatever's left, you guys can have, and you can go and have the garage sale someplace else. You don't need to do it at the crime scene. I don't think that that's appropriate. Well, they did it anyways at the house. There were drawers missing from the kitchen. We cleaned the house for 2 weeks, and then they did 2 weeks of cleaning, and they left a bunch of stuff behind. So then I got harassed by our landlord for quite a few weeks. And I would reach out to them and be asking for support, and then nobody would go and do any of the stuff that they left behind. So my family did it. We actually had like 20 of my friends and family members, some people I didn't even know that well, show up to the house and help clean it all. And so, like, it was just a lot of that stuff kind of started compounding. And then I started hearing from friends, like, there being like negative comments said by the other side of the family. Wasn't what people were ready for.
What kind of comments?
In court, if people showed up and sat on the wrong side of the courtroom, they would get phone calls saying, how dare you sit on this side of the courtroom? Some friends got their lives threatened. by family members on his side. And so we shared those recordings with the police, and and those became part of my restraining orders as well, because they only last, a year. So sometimes I had to renew, and I would have letters where they were threatening and phone calls that they had made. Their worry was about his mental health and how he needed friends and needed support. And so then when people wouldn't go visit or weren't comfortable with that, then they would get threatening phone calls saying, I can't believe you didn't go. And then it was a lot of bad, awful stuff about me, like hoping I get hit by a car. And like, it was really awful. It didn't, and at the time, that didn't really bother me, because that to me was like, well, that just shows your true colors.
Yeah.
Like, you just sealed the deal that you will never see my son. 100% you're out.
Elaine was able to negotiate the divorce so that she only has to send Brian one yearly photo of her son, Will. How do you pick?
Sometimes I pick a picture I don't really like. I won't be sad if it goes like that. That's fine. Sometimes I pick one that maybe is kind of boring. Sometimes I pick one maybe once or twice if it caught me in the wrong vein because something had happened. I picked one that wasn't the best picture, but I sent my picture.
Luckily, Brian's first wife agreed that Elaine's stepdaughter would still be able to go over to Elaine's house and grow up with her baby brother.
It was really important to her mom and myself that the siblings be close to each other. And her mom and I hadn't always seen eye to eye on some things. And it wasn't like we didn't get along, but it was because my ex was kind of in the middle. And so once the attack happened, we talked to each other on the phone, and we were like, okay, now we got to be united front, because you're going through your custody battle. I'm going through my custody battle. Let's stick together and do what's best for the kids. And over the years, she and I have got to know each other better and better, and now we're pretty friendly with each other.
Talking to her stepdaughter, and later her son, about what happened is walking a fine line. You want to be honest, but also not to traumatize them. Did she know he attacked you?
I don't know at what age her mom told her, but I knew she knew that I got hurt, and she's a pretty smart cookie. She knew that I got hurt and it had something to do, with her dad, and that we couldn't be together because he wasn't making good choices. But because, the girl's bright, she graduated high school in 3 years. So I knew that she was putting together a whole lot more than what she was saying. And I always made sure she knew she could ask me anything she wanted.
Does Will know the extent of everything?
Yeah. So he would say, he never really asked where his dad was. And so he never really cared. I think my brother and my dad being such strong male role models, the friend that lived in the basement apartment, he came over all the time. And that had a huge impact on my son, having those 3 great male role models around that he never even noticed, or really thought about. I don't have a dad. Huh. And then in kindergarten, I talked to the counselor at school, and he got put in a group for kids whose parents are incarcerated, but he didn't know that's what the group was for. Mm-hmm. So they pose it as a group for kids whose parents aren't around, who have a parent not around. They don't talk about the incarceration part. So that really helped him too. They do a whole workbook together and talk about having only one parent there. And I think lots of those little things we put in place just helped him have the right mindset and how to think about it. So when he was 9 or 10, he asked me, you always say that he made not good choices and he hurt you, but I would like to know more. And my son's stepsister was there too. And I was like, you really, really want to know? And they were both like, yes, we need to know more about it. So I gave more detail, and I said, now do you understand why? He was like, got it. Don't want to see him anyways. don't like that. If he hurt my mom, I don't want anything to do with him. And I said, it's your choice. If you get older and you decide you want to see him, I would hear you on that. And he was like, why would I want to? He's like, I don't like walk around being like, oh, I wish I had a dad.
Will was totally fine with never knowing his father. But for Elaine, the attack was completely out of nowhere. And up until the moment he looked at her with that strange look in his eyes, Elaine was happily married. You were happy with him.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about mourning the loss of having that happy relationship being like yanked out from under you?
Mm-hmm. Knowing that you had this idea that you're going to get married and you're going to have a couple of kids and this is what's going to happen. And now I have lost my house. I don't have any money. All my money is gone fighting court fees and everything else. My parents paid for the rest. I've now lived with my parents. My bedroom is their family room. But what bothered me the most was knowing I was going through my pregnancy without a partner. That was just something I always looked forward to, that kind of bonding you could see between a husband and wife, like when the birth and in the birthing classes and all of that. And now I knew I had to totally flip my script and start over and figure out how I was going to do that.
Yeah. But you also like lost your best friend.
Yeah. So that's also why you can't sleep. Like your brain is trying to sort through, here you have this feeling, but you also have this feeling. I think what helped me more with that is that I was still scared of him.
Mm.
And that had I not been afraid of him still, then there would probably be more of me that loved him. And so there was more of me that was afraid of him than what loved him.
Yeah.
And that helped me to let him go.
Brian was sentenced to 7.5 years and was released in 2019.
I was pretty nervous because I did not know for sure if he would leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
And not like he would necessarily hurt me. That wasn't really my fear. It was more of, would he accept no as an answer? So I knew that he was going to be put on an ankle monitor and that they gave me the ability to say all the places I don't want him to go to that I frequent regularly.
Oh.
So my son's school had like a big perimeter that his bracelet could not go within. My house had one. I could say a place as big as Autzen Stadium because I had season tickets.
Yeah.
And so knowing that he lived in town also was not my favorite. So then when he moved out of town, that helped a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen him at all?
I have not. Sometimes I used to think if in the later years when he was incarcerated, if I had gone in and talked to him, like, would that have helped me
Mm-hmm.
to move on? Like if I had said stuff, or would it have made it worse?
Yeah.
But there were parts of me that wanted to go in and say, like, here are the things that I did not say. And you're mad at me for these things I did not say. And what if I could just hash it all out? But
you can't control what he says, so it's a risk. Today, Elaine is happily remarried and continues to work as a kindergarten teacher.
Had I not met my ex, I wouldn't have my son. And so people were like, don't you wish you never met him? I got that all the time. Don't you wish you just never met him? No, because then I wouldn't have my son, who is like my favorite person in the whole world, like hands down. And so I always say, like, all of this had to happen. It was even in my wedding vows, like all of these things in my life led me back to my current husband. My life would be totally different without it. And just believing that sometimes you have to make a hard decision, but it will take you maybe to where you need to go to find other happiness. You know, the one door closes, another door opens.
This is Live to Tell. I'm Caitlin Van Mall. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at Live to Tell Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps the show. I'll see you in 2 weeks.